of the daily debate. I'm joined in the studio by Mr. Ahmed, Sumih, head of the Al-Andalus Institute for Tolerance and Anti-Violence Studies. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on tonight's edition of the daily debate.
Good evening, Angie. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, sir. Now let's begin off with a look. How would you describe the humanitarian situation now in Libya, basically the east of the country now under the control of the protesters?
It seems that the situation is going very bad every day, and it seems that, as I understand, and as some of my information says, that the only active people on the east side of Libya right now is the international organizations who are supporting international aid, like Doctor Without Borders.
Yes.
They are my neighbors in the building, so we discuss what kind of aid they can do. But in the end of the day, this international organizations is not able to work alone without the support of governments. And I think it's a moment of truth that the Egyptian government and the Arab different governors have to start working to support the protesters. Let us put it away from politics. The people, the Libyan people on the east side and the west side of Libya. In the end of the day, none of the regimes in the Middle East accept the situation in Libya, the political situation in Libya. And in the end of the day, you need to put a very sure distinguish between the political point of view of the governments and the humanitarian situation there. My understanding that the people, the Arab people, is supporting the protesters, putting themselves in the same situation, and think if we are in the same situation, if we are as Egyptian in the same situation like people in suffering in Libya, I think we will asking for help by other governments. And it's actually, if there is a politician in the Arab region wanted to have credit of any political action along the regime from Morocco to Bahrain, is successful. It will be a very successful action if a specific Arab politician decided to support the people away from the government.
Right. Mr. Sumih, that actually leads me to my next question. When the UN Security Council proposed sanctions against Libya, basically economic ones, Turkey's ambassador to the UN said that this would be harmful to the people of Libya, not the regime. Would you agree with that statement?
I agree very much with that statement. I think sanctions must be focused on military aid, focus on weapons, guns, equipment. The regime, the stupid regime of Libya, of Gaddafi, is using to harm his own people. But this is take us again to the Arab region and take us again to the Arab politicians. Why always the North is trying to support? Why Turkey? Egypt can play a great role right now of supporting the Libyan people, of transporting and exporting the Egyptian revolution and the Egyptian revolution values. Part of the Egyptian revolution values and 25th of January was the dignity, and part of what Libyan people was asking is dignity. I know personally that a lot of Egyptian activists is traveling through the borders. I know that Qaba'il bin Ali in the west side of Egyptian borders is traveling across the borders to support them people there. But I don't think this is enough. I think it's a good time for the human rights organizations, Egyptian human rights organization, and the Egyptian government and the military council to start do humanity aid activities, not in the Egyptian border side, but to the other side directly.
Right. Now, the UN Human Rights Organization has said that there is evidence of crimes against humanity. Now, what is this evidence? Do they mean footage or witness accounts or on-hand investigations? And what steps, in your opinion, should be taken?
It's the International Human Rights Watch who said that today. It seems that it's mix of everything. It's mix between footage, videos, eyewitnesses, and it seems that it's very obvious what's going on there. Even you have an eyewitnesses from military. They received order to do an airstrike against their own people,
right?
Which is not acceptable in any decent, respectable army in the world. But in the end of the day, as we can see, Gaddafi do not listen to governments. Gaddafi do not listen to human rights organizations. Gaddafi is only listening to himself and to his own hallucinations. I don't know if he thinks himself funny, but he's not funny anymore. He became a murderer.
Now human lives are at stake.
And human rights, exactly.
Now, was the United Nations able to be in contact with protesters and the leaders of the protesting groups and in the eastern parts of Libya to access food and medical supplies, which reports are now saying they are in dire need of?
I don't think the United Nations far away from starting this kind of communication. Egypt can play an important role.
And indeed, you already mentioned that the Doctors Without Borders
is already there.
Yes. And now, could you tell me a bit about their work of the medical dispatches operating on the borders with Egypt and Libya? Do you have any reports on the work,
I don't
the
have
conditions?
specific reports. I just met with one of the doctors, and my understanding that they are trying to get as much as they can of equipment and medical equipment to export it directly to Alexandria, and from Alexandria they take it directly to Saloum, and from Saloum they cross the borders. My understanding that the Egyptian army also is letting in any doctors from any kind of nationalities to the direction of Benghazi. But is a small organization is able to help millions? I don't think. Maybe they have the good intentions, but I'm sure they need the good support. I would like to take the opportunity to ask the Egyptian people to cooperate with this kind of organizations and to give them the aid and to give them the support, which will be handled in a very good way.
Right. Mr. Samieh, allow me now. We're joined over Mr. Samieh, your comment on it, the ambassador's input.
I hope the Egyptian government support this, not only the ambassador himself, with all the respect for his great point of views, but I hope also the Egyptian government supporting this. The Arab League need to support this also. A military intervention in Libya right now will end that some Arab countries, some Arab armies will need to support this, or at least join this kind of troops. And this is a big question to be asked right now in Egypt and Tunisia, and I don't think Sudan will going to support this by anyhow. It's a dilemma, it's a political dilemma, but every 1 second we spend to solve this dilemma, a human is dying back there in Benghazi or in Trablus or in Zawiya. It seems that we will back again to the international community. It seems that NATO, United States, EU are going to take the initiative, and it seems that we have another failure state in the Arab region, cannot defend themselves and only attack them on human and them on human beings and them on citizens, which is very shameful
Right.
on us.
Let me ask you, sir, how accessible is Libya, or at least parts of the country, how accessible is it to international humanitarian organizations or other organizations aiming to enter the country to provide assistance?
It's very accessible. The Egyptian military only asking for passports. They check the passports, and for foreigners, and for the Egyptians, they check the passport and the Egyptian ID. It's totally safe, as I understand, from Salloum to Benghazi. The Egyptians and the Libyans starting different trips, people using different kind of cars to access to Benghazi and to the other cities on the east side. It's accessible, but it's risky.
Of course.
I
mean, the people trying to leave the country are struggling to leave.
Most of the Libyans.
Are the evacuation? No, not Libyans. Speaking now about foreigners, for example.
Of course.
The circumstances for foreigners in Libya, are they struggling to still evacuate the country?
Yeah, but surprisingly, Libyan people don't want to leave. And surprisingly, people of Libya is very proud of what they do, and they stay there, and they are welcoming. I heard an Egyptian activist that women's been meeting him from Libya with zagharit, I mean, saluting
jubilation.
him in very traditional Arab way, because just he showed his face and he says he's Egyptian in Benghazi in one of the demonstrations. There is a very close ties between the two nations since long time, and it's now the time to pay to our brotherhood relations.
What would you comment on Saif al-Islam Gaddafi's statements that Libya is back to normal? That's a quotation.
He need to meet a shrink as soon as he can, and if it's possible to take his father with him, that would be very, very nice.
How about after cleaning up the streets of Libya and inviting the press to see that there was nothing abnormal, would there still be evidence of the massacres to hold Gaddafi accountable for these crimes against humanity?
You cannot hide the unknown number of dead bodies. You cannot hide how much tears, and you cannot, if you able to hide the body, you cannot hide his family.
Right.
And you cannot hide his mothers.
The witnesses.
And you cannot hide the witnesses. As much cleaning they do in troubles, that's it. The whole world know that.
Right.
It's the internet, the mobile phones, and the YouTube and the Facebook. It's there. Everybody know about it. Everybody shame and blame on Gaddafi.
Right.
And all these political games is not applicable on human rights activists who's well trained to follow this kind of accidents. And it's not applicable even on the Egyptian people or Libyan people or any normal citizen. I've been watching an international news agency, and I've been seeing today in big demonstrations in Geneva, and a lot of Suez citizens been participating in this demonstration. One of them told that TV channel that he thought that Gaddafi is a revolutionary person, but he lost that picture once he know that he's shooting at his own people.
Right. Right. Mr. Ahmed Samieh, head of Al-Andalus Institution for Tolerance and Anti-Violence Studies, thank you very much for joining us on tonight's edition of the Daily Debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jay.
And ladies and gentlemen, do stay tuned for my colleague Munam Salhi, who will be back with the